Another returnee from the days of Medarot 9 with a relatively unconventional approach to a rather iconic fantasy motif of Rapunzel. It is RPN00 Queen Braid, with the kit of all repair, double countdown, multi-legs, and the leg ability of shape memory, which equalizes HP across all parts when charging metaphors, and will also restore broken ones upon charging. Now, as another model and a returnee from Medarot 9, much like Shanglong, who was releasing the same time, there really wasn't a lot of, say, modernization that would need done to get Queen Braid ready for Medarot S. But all the same, she is packing some skills we have seen up to date. But it is worth noting, however, that Queen Braid is actually the first and currently only female type in existence to be packing Countdown, which will make her a particularly nasty force to be reckoned with, and allow a lot of interesting flexibility and versatility on mono female teams. All Repair is a healing skill that, once activated, will restore a small amount of HP to all parts of the user or of the target or ally, which will, and its level of healing you get is relative to the level of the healing skill on the medal. Right and left arm of Countdown and rather iconic attacks, if used correctly, can be very, very dangerous if timed right. In particular, upon inflicting Countdown upon an opponent, it will clock them with a timer of 4. Upon hitting them 3 or 4 more times, it will knock this timer down 1 tick per hit. Upon knocking the timer down to 0, it does not matter how healthy the target is or how close to dying the target is. Once that timer hits 0, it is good night to that particular target and a guaranteed kill. This can make this a very nasty skill if used correctly, especially if you can find yourself spamming the skill, say between Queen Braid or even Gan King, who was the first iconic user of it, or even spreading the parts to make spamming it a lot easier. Multi-legs means that Queen Braid has relatively decent coverage across most terrains, arguably one of the next best under Biped in many cases, and the leg ability of Shape Memory is a rather interesting addition, if I'm completely honest, as this does mean that upon charging Metaforce, any lost HP will be equalized across the entirety of her kit relative to the amount of HP she has left. Now, if she has any broken arms, this does mean she can bring the arm back upon charging Metaforce at the cost of equalizing her HP and making her just a little squishy in trade for it, unless she can restore her own HP back, which thankfully she is able to a point. Her base armor is actually relatively nice too, I'd say, compared to where most females are, at about 3350 for the head, about 2750 per arm, and about 3900 for the legs. Relatively decent HP pool, to be completely honest. Leg stats are leave a little bit to be desired, but not super powerful either. Melee resist of 1540 is really, really good though, as this means that Queen Braid will have no problem shrugging off a lot of incoming melee attacks and keeping the damage on those as low as possible. Shoot resist of 809 is not super great, but not terrible either, as that means it will be relatively neutral when it comes to reducing damage from incoming shooting attacks. An evade of 693 is definitely not super great though, but with a big clunky leg like that, dodging is probably the last thing on Queen Braid's mind anyway. And in a mobility of 501 is actually kind of par for the course compared to most other conventional multi-legs that we do see in other pools, such as the permanent pool, friend point, or even in some fierce battles. So she will be relatively equal across the board with a good chunk of those. But the shape memory ability is also nice as mentioned, as this does kind of give her an extra round of survivability when she starts taking damage. That being said though, as a pure set score, I do sadly have to rate Queen Braid a pretty solid 5.5 out of 10. Given that even though her skill on paper can be made very potentially dangerous, because Countdown is also considered an ailment, it can be negated by anyone using Stat Cleanse. And if Stat Cleanse is on the opposing enemy's side, this does honestly spell the end for any possible hopes for viability that Queen Braid might bring to the table. Inversely, however, it is also worth noting, like I said, that Queen Braid is the first and currently only female model to have Countdown, which will open a lot of versatility and possibility for teams that want to make use of it, but are, say, limited to female-only type of modifiers, which would thus prevent, say, Gan King from being used instead. So she does have viability, but it is relatively niche on how you choose to use it. That being said, however, as mixed parts, I do have to rate her just a little higher at a 6 out of 10. Even though all repair and her multi-legs may not be super great, the shape memory ability can make the leg stats just a little bit forgivable to a point, but Countdown is honestly going to be where the big charm is with Queen Braid. Though it is also worth noting that both of her arms are heavy, which means that some consideration will need to be taken into account if you do choose to make use of Countdown on any mono female teams, or any especially Countdown-centric teams that involve spamming the attack non-stop.